Hello there, Des Kelly here from GMIT Letterfrack, and welcome along to another of our DCG SolidWorks tutorials. Before we begin, if you'd like to find out more information about the degree programs we offer in furniture design, wood technology or teacher education, then please see our Facebook or Twitter pages. Welcome everyone. So in this video we're going to draw the torch you see here. So let's make a start. So we're going to open up a new part and open up a new sketch, and we're going to draw a rectangle on the front plane, and I'll just get a center rectangle to make sure it's nice and neatly centered, and we'll smart dimension this to be 95 and this to be 95. So my geometry is fully defined. Now we're going to put a sketch fillet in all four corners, and we're going to put a sketch fillet radius 22 in all four corners, and that's my first sketch. Okay, so we're happy with that. Now we'll bring in a new plane, so go to Features, Reference Geometry. We'll close the sketch first, of course. So reference geometry plane, and select the front plane and bring a plane parallel to that, a distance of 150. Okay. And on this new plane we'll open up another sketch, and this time rather than drawing we can use the geometry that's there already, so we'll just offset those entities. And we want to make those offset 3 millimeters, so we'll change this to 3 mil. And now we have our second sketch. Okay, I don't need this plane for the moment, so I'll just hide that. And to create the main body of the torch, we'll carry out a lofted boss base between this line and this line. If you happen to get a twisted loft that looks like this, just be sure to drag those green drag handles back into alignment, like that. Okay, so now we'll open up a sketch on the right plane, and because the rectangle was centered about the origin, the right plane should intersect perfectly symmetrically through this artifact. So we'll start a sketch. Press the space bar to look normal to the shape, and we'll be sure to snap onto the midpoint of this line and draw a line straight out to the left and straight up vertically. And to finish this triangle that I'm about to draw, I'm going to use a spline, but just use a 2-point spline, which of course should be a straight line. And I will dimension this bottom line to be 55 and this vertical line to be 75. And if I click this line, because it's a spline, I can drag this diamond and this diamond shape to move that around. I can also drag the arrowhead to make the spline a little longer in both directions. Now what I want to do up here is make sure that this drag handle is horizontal. So to do that, I can change the angle down here to 0. And with this one, I don't necessarily mind if this one is vertical or not, but I want it to certainly interfere with the main solid. So I'm going to drag it back until it looks right, like that. And to massage, if you like, this curve to make it look right, just drag those handles and make them longer or shorter. But again, I want to set that back to 0 degrees. So when we're finished with that, we'll close the sketch and we'll test it. So Features, Revolve Boss Base, and we'll see how it looks. Now I know that's going to cause me problems because it hasn't fully intersected with the main body that I've just lofted. We want to avoid a situation like this because that will not allow it to be filleted in a moment's time. So we can improve that, but let's go back in and edit the sketch and just move those drag handles out a little bit more, and hopefully now we're nearly there. We're not quite there yet. Just make it a little longer, and now we have it. So that's the main body of our torch. So after that, let's add on the extrusion here, which will later take the thread of the lid. So that's a sketch, a circle onto this, and we will dimension that to be diameter 140 and we will extrude that to a height of 20. And finally, let's hollow out what we have. Let's apply a shell of 4 millimeters to the entire surface. Looks okay, and approve that. So now that that's the main body of the torch completed, let's add the handle to the top. So to do that, we're going to draw a sketch on the right plane. And in order to have something to reference, we can bring in a sketch picture. This could be a picture you've taken from the internet or a photograph you've taken yourself. So I'm going to start a new sketch on that plane, and if you go to Tools, Sketch Tools, Sketch Picture, you'll often find it to be grayed out. So it's usually necessary just to open a sketch command like a line. And rather than drawing, now we can go to Tools, Sketch Tools, and now the sketch picture icon is active. So if I go to my desktop, that's where I've saved this picture. When you bring in that picture, you can freely drag it around. So you can resize it here. If you want to be precise, you can change its size based on coordinates or dimensions over here. But I'm just going to drag it in until it looks right. And when you're happy with it, you can commit to it and close that sketch and leave the sketch picture there. You could have a sketch and a sketch picture within the same sketch, but I rather open up a new sketch to trace around the sketch picture. That way, later, if I need to turn on and view the sketch picture, I don't have to turn on and view the sketch I'm about to draw. So if I look at 90 degrees to it, I can very carefully trace around it. Now I need to be careful here. I'm going to turn on this view so I can see where the material stops. I don't want to draw this handle cutting down into the hollow or the shell I've just created. So I'm carefully going to start in here. And I'm going to draw a line up. This fillet at the corner, I'm going to achieve that later with a sketch fillet. So for now, I'm going to just leave that as a straight line. And over here, I'll achieve the same thing. I'll just achieve this with a straight line. And now using a spline, I'll carefully make my way across the top with the spline and join up like that. So while I'm here, I'll try and put on that sketch fillet. So hit sketch fillet. Let's see what the radius 22 looks like. It's a little large, so let's change that to 15. A little smaller, 12, and that looks okay. So we'll approve that. And now we'll try and use a spline to mimic the shape of the handle. And I'm going to stop that there. I'm just going to drag some of those points to even it off a little. And I'm going to use a straight line to continue this down. And it's very important that you close the sketch here. It's not important that they're perfectly horizontal or anything. Just close the sketch there and also over here. Now if you so wish, you can edit the splines, you can massage them slightly, but for now I'm happy with that. One thing I might do, I might just take this line and drag it into horizontal alignment, or sorry, vertical alignment. It'll make my life easier later. This one is already vertical. You'll see why that's important in a moment. So now I can turn off the sketch picture, which is in a different sketch, without turning off my sketch. Because I separated those out, I can do that. And I'll turn back on this display style, and I can extrude this handle shape out. Because it's symmetrical, I don't want it to extrude one side, I want it to extrude as a mid-plane. And I'm going to extrude this to a total width of 25 millimeters. Now in a moment I'm going to make sure that this merge result box is unselected, but for now I'll leave it selected. And here you can see the torch is drawn. It's still a little blocky. We'll fix that with fillets in a moment. But there is no folder in the feature manager called solid bodies. This is all one solid body, one solid mass, if you like. So by right clicking that previous extrude and editing the feature, this time we will deselect merge result. Press OK. Now we have a folder called solid bodies, in which we have the shell 1 feature, which is the main bit of the torch, and the boss extrude feature, which is the newly made handle. So why that's important is we can turn off the visibility of either of those bodies in turn and work with them individually. Okay, so to continue, we're going to add some reference geometry, in this case a plane, and we're going to offset it from the top plane and make sure it's above the torch like that. Then we'll open up a sketch on that plane and we'll look 90 degrees to it, and we're going to draw a slot. And we want to make sure that by holding control, this line, I'll try that again, this line and that line are collinear, and also that this curve is tangential to that top line. Now it may not allow me to select that top line because that line is not on the plane. So if we offset entities, now I already have that line selected, press OK, it should pop that line onto the plane. Likewise, we will select this line and offset entities so that comes onto the plane. Now we should be able to hold control and make this line and this arc tangential, and also this line and this arc tangential. So that should be that. And now if I open up my extrude cut feature and select this profile and extrude cut that through everything, we get some funny business happening here. That's clearly not what I want. So what I want to do is, let's just delete that feature. First of all, I don't want it cutting through the torch body itself, so I will turn off that. Secondly, I do want to extrude cut this shape, but I do not want this solid in the center to disappear. I want the edges to disappear. So what I will do is select flip side to cut, in which case it should do this for me. What it does is it cuts everything outside that shape and it leaves everything inside the shape intact. So now I can turn off the visibility of that plane, I can turn back on my original part, and you'll see it has not cut or damaged my original part. So let's now get some details into this handle. Because this is a flat plane, as is the far side, we can open up a sketch on it, and rather than drawing all the profiles again, I'm going to try my luck at opening up a line command and then offsetting entities. So you can see it's already prompted and tried to do the offset for me, but it's gone the wrong direction, so I'll reverse that direction so it comes inside, and as it happens it's already set to 3 mil, which is what I want. So press OK on that. Now I will extrude cut that a distance of 7 millimeters into the handle. Give me that little indentation, and now I will mirror that feature through the right plane, remembering that the right plane is perfectly centered in the torch, and the feature that I want to mirror is cut extrude 3. So now I have that notch both sides. So now it's time to start rounding over some of these faces. It looks very blocky at the moment. And the first thing I'm going to do is apply a fillet. Let's say radius 30 mil, a rather large radius fillet, to round over the intersection between both parts of the main body. And now if I try to add a fillet between the handle and the lower body of the torch, it won't let me because they are two separate bodies. So to join those back together, we'll go to Insert, Features and Combine, select each body and approve it. Now both of those bodies have been joined into a single body, and you'll notice our solid bodies folder on the left has disappeared, and now we should be able to add a fillet. So let's just say an 8 mil fillet between the handle and the body there. Approve that, and let's just say a 4 mil fillet at the tail end here, and the 4 mil fillet seems to be a bit big, so let's go to 3 mil fillet and it works fine. And while we're at it, we'll see if we can put a 4 mil fillet onto the back there. It doesn't like that, so let's go to 3 mil fillet again, and the 3 mil fillet is fine. Now I want to round over a lot of these sharp corners, so I'll open up a 1 mil fillet and select as many of these faces as I can. In fact, any line I can find that looks a little sharp, I'm going to apply a 1 mil radius fillet. It really improves the photorealistic image that we'll be doing later if most of these corners are rounded over. So I'm happy with that, and I'll approve it. And now we have a pretty rounded looking torch. It looks as if all the sharp corners have been removed. So now let's start adding in some of the grips, or these intricate pads that you saw at the beginning. And how we're going to do this is as follows. We're going to start up a plane, and we will put that plane outside the torch. In fact, we don't need it to be that far outside it, we just need it to be outside it. And on that plane we'll draw a profile that looks a little something like this. This is going to be the shape of the little grip, the extrusion if you like, offset from the surface. And we'll make this say 25. We'll make this bottom line 75. And we'll make sure that the center of this line is directly opposite or horizontal to the origin. One way of achieving that is to right click the line and select midpoint, and the midpoint becomes selected. And now if you hold Control and select the origin, you should be able to add a horizontal constraint. And I want to dimension this distance to be 15. And finally I want this line to be at an angle of 60 degrees. So I don't want it to be perfectly sharp like that. I want to use a sketch fillet to round over the corners to a radius of 6 mil. Now this notification just tells me that this 75mm dimension is relying on that corner. By adding a fillet, it's essentially deleting the corner, so it's going to make its own sense of it. It's going to put a little marker in the corner. So just select yes, and if it crops up again, just select yes again. So now we have that profile. I want that profile to be projected onto this surface, but this surface is a loft. It's not a flat surface as such, it's a more complicated surface, so it's not easy sketch on that. So I'm going to use a roundabout way to do that. What I'm going to do is extrude this profile all the way through the torch, so it comes out the far side. I'll make sure it is deselected here so the result is not merged. And now I have two separate intersecting bodies. So if I want, I can turn off that intersecting body and hide it from sight. But for now, I do need it. And why I need it is this. I'm going to go to Tools, Sketch Tools, Intersection Curve. And now by selecting this face, and then this solid. Now to select the solid, rather than clicking it in the graphics window, I'm going to select it from the solid bodies folder. Now you can see the face and the Boss Extrude solid are selected. So if I press OK, I get a very nice sketch where those intersect. So now if I hide that body, I'm pretty much finished with that. 3D Sketch 1 gives me the intersection both sides. Now I'll work with that in a moment, but for now I'm going to create a second sketch on this plane. This time it's a little bit more intricate. It's going to start and go across, take the same shape, but this time it's going to lap over the edge of the torch. So I do want this line to be collinear with this line, so if I hold Control and select both of those lines, I can add a collinear relation. This line and this line will also have a collinear relation. I will smart dimension its overall height to be 45. I'll just drag that down a little. The gap between them will be, let's leave it at 10. And then just to finish it, we will put the 6mm sketch fillet on these two corners. We don't need it on the bottom corners because they're not going to intersect. And we'll do the same thing again. We'll go to Tools, Sketch Tools, Intersection Curve. We'll select the sketch. I missed. We'll try that again. Tools, Sketch Tools, Intersection Curves. We'll select the sketch. If I can't select the sketch here, I'm going to select it from the drop-down menu. And I'm also going to select, now that didn't allow me to select at that time. Of course, I forgot to extrude it, so I'm going to X this and go Features, Extrude the boss base. We'll extrude the profile first of all, of course, and make sure it goes through the solid. We'll merge the result. We won't merge the result. Press OK. And now, of course, it's not the sketch, it's the solid body I want to intersect with the model. So Tools, Sketch Tools, Intersection Curve. We'll select the face and that final solid body, and you can see a much more complicated intersection curve is generated this time. And if I hide the plane in a moment, you should be able to see both of them at the bottom. So let's use those, and we're going to do a bit of surface modeling here. I ultimately want to take each of those sections. If I just highlight them here, you can see that section and that section, and I want to not extrude them out, but do a thing called a thicken, surface thicken them out. So first of all, I need to tell SolidWorks to view this face as a surface. It doesn't necessarily know it as a surface yet. So to do that, you can either access them by going to Insert and Surface, all the commands appear there, or if you right click up here and make sure the Surfaces tab is highlighted, you can get the Surfaces features in here. So the first thing I want to do is knit surface. Knit surface can be used to knit multiple surfaces together, or in our case we're just going to select this one surface and approve that. And what that does, it tells the software to consider that as a surface rather than a face. I know it's worked because now in the feature manager I've got a folder called surface bodies. But that surface knit is that entire surface. I don't want that entire surface. I just want this little element of it. So now I'm going to go to trim surface. And over here the trim tool is going to be this sketch. And I want to keep selections. So if I select this area and this area, those two areas will be kept. So now I have those two little areas. So the final thing is to thicken those. And if I select that and that, I can thicken those to a particular distance. In my case, I want to thicken it to 3 mil. And you can do a mid-plane, which will thicken it out both sides, or just a one-directional or a unidirectional thicken, which will thicken it either one side or the other. So one is fine. Now I may have to do these individually. I think I do, so I'll do them individually. So when I press OK on that, that thickens its way out. Let's do the bottom. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to knit this surface together again. So knit surface, select the surface, and now trim the surface. And in this case, I've failed to clear the memory, so you can see the trim tool has already been selected. So let's clear that selection. So the trim tool is this 3D sketch, and the section to keep is this bottom portion. And now I can thicken that bottom portion to a distance of 3 millimeters. And finally, we're just going to have to thicken this one. Now let me just check. In fact, that already has been segregated out earlier as a separate surface. So I can just thicken that one, make sure the direction is correct, and there it is. So what I'll do now is put a few fillets, 1 mil radius fillets on the various surfaces. That was a mistake. If you ever click a line by accident, just click it again to remove it. I meant to select this face and also this face. And then the intersections between those thickens and the main torch body themselves. And finally this one. And we're set. So those are the little grip pads. So now what we're going to do is add some webs or some ribs within the torch to take the battery that we'll apply later. And to do that, I'm going to select the top plane and section it. And to just temporarily hold that section, I'll press the green tick. And what I want to do is create a sketch on a plane. Now I can't select this flat surface because that technically isn't a surface, that's just the appearance of a surface. I need to select the plane within the feature manager. So in this case it's the top plane, and I'm going to create a sketch on the top plane that looks like this. And I'm going to dimension it here to be, say, 10 mil. I'm going to tell this line to be a height of, say, 110, and we'll just tell this line to be approximately 22, say, and just so that it is in the middle of the plane, the body there. So when we're happy with that, we can rotate the model around and see what we have. We can use the rib tool to tell that to generate a rib for us. Now I want to leave it at 10 mil, so I will do that. In fact, just to be different, let's change it down to, say, 8 mil. And now that will generate a rib for me. Now, there's a rebuild error there. Yes, I forgot to select the body. You must select the body. For instance, I have to select this body with a click, and that will tell this rib feature what body to come down as far as. And give it a moment, it will rebuild the rib. So if I turn off the section view within the torch, I've got that rib. So very quickly, to rotate that around 4 times, rather than drawing it 4 times, we'll go reference geometry, axis, we'll pop in an axis there, and we'll do a circular pattern about that axis, and this is what I want to rotate around. Now I do not want to rotate it around 20 times, I want to rotate it around 4 times, approve that, and now we have the rib. Now the battery doesn't actually fit neatly in there, but when we draw the battery later, we will pop it in there and cut the shape of the battery out of that. I'll hide that axis now. So in my browser, I'm going to select the axis and hide it. So at this stage, let's put a thread on the top of the torch. So to do that, we'll open up a new sketch on this surface and draw a circle. It's actually going to be radius 70, and close the sketch. And now we will go to features, curves, helix and spiral. And we want this thread to wrap around a few times, so you can experiment with it, but let's have the pitch set at 5 millimeters, and let's have revolutions set to 3.5 revolutions. Now I do want it to stop. I don't want it to come off the edge of the surface. So let's stop the thread there. One thing I will do as well is make sure that the start angle is either 0, 90, 180 or 270, which will make my life easy in a minute. That means that the helix is going to start neatly on one of the planes. As you can see here, the start of my helix, if I just select it, is over here at that point. So if I start a sketch, a new sketch of a slot on the top plane, and over here I'm going to draw the slot just to one side for a moment, and you can experiment with this yourself, but I'm going to make this element of the slot 2 mil and make the radius of this 1 mil. And then I'm going to select this particular point. In fact, I'll select the midpoint, and I'll merge that by holding Control and selecting the spline. In fact, I'll pierce it so that it's nice and neatly on the helix. So now I'll do a swept boss base and sweep that along the helix, and I should get that nice thread. So when you have that thread, I don't like leaving that edge sharp, so what I'm going to do is a little trick to round that over. Reference geometry plane, I'm going to select this top portion of the torch and also that point, so it puts a plane through that point, which will then allow me to create a sketch of a spline on that plane. I'm just going to start there and work my way down into the body of that. So I can select that and I can make it a little bit curved if I wish, and close that sketch. Then I'll hide that plane, and I want to take this profile, this shape, and sweep it along that curve. So to do that, I will open up a sketch on that surface, and rather than drawing around it, I should be able to convert entities, and it makes a sketch on that surface for me. Now it's just a matter of doing a sweep along that, and you can see the result will be that. Just a nice easing of the helix. So at this stage, we pretty much have the body of our torch done. I'm not going to add colours or materials at this stage, but what I am going to do is section the torch again. I'll section it along this plane, and I'm going to use this to draw in the lens. So what I'm going to do is create a sketch on the right plane, and I'm carefully going to create the sketch here, and there. And this sketch is going to make up the lens, as I said, but by drawing it here, it allows me to perfectly position it for later. So I'm going to use a spline to finish off this particular element of it, and I'm going to make very sure, or make sure that I stop the spline in the center of the torch, horizontal with the origin I mean, and I can take that spline then and edit it as I see fit, and I can also ensure that it does not foul or run into any of the other geometry. If you want this to be a perfect tangent, when you're dragging this, just make sure you set that to 0. In fact, I should have set that to 180, I believe. Sorry, it's this one to set to 0. And if you want this one to be a perfect tangent at the bottom, then this drag handle should also be set to 0, or in this case 90. Or in fact it should be minus 90 because it's vertical, so minus 90. And if you're worried about this being a little too close to the edge, then use the arrows to shorten the length of the spline. So I'll just put another spline on here. You could offset it just to be different. I'm going to put a different spline on it, and you can spend a bit of time manipulating that to suit yourself as well. So I'll set that to 0, and I'll set this one to minus 90, and we'll just shorten them up a little. Now the offset would mean I wouldn't have to estimate that. And finally, I'll just join those 2 points from there to there. Select, and now I'm ready to do a revolve. And the good thing about that revolve is, if I apply the revolve feature about this line, it generates a perfectly fitting lens for me, and it sinks in perfectly up there. But the important thing to do, which I forgot to do, I'll go back for a second, is to edit that sketch and tell this particular area here to be a particular value, say 2 mil in this case. And also dimension this, let's say we want that to be 3 mil. And now we're ready for the revolve again. So revolve boss base through that line, and we're set. Let's remember not to merge the result, because I want this to be a separate body. So if I approve that, and if I turn off the section, I now have the torch with the lens in it.